We're live now, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Far Cotton and Delapré Parish Council meeting on the 27th of January 2021. The purpose of this meeting is to review the draft budget and decide on the precept we're going to have for 2021-22. I'll say if you're watching this online or live stream or at a later date, you can find the details on Northampton Borough Council's website. Before we move on to the agenda, I would like to inform the committee that Councillor Oldham has stood down due to ill health in his family, and I wish him and his family well. So his replacement is Councillor Phil Larratt. So congratulations, Councillor Larratt.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, moving on, we have apologies. Any apologies?
No apologies.
No, thank you. Any declarations of interest?
No.
No, thank you. Got the minutes. Any problems with the minutes anyone has? I have two. I picked up on number 7 and number 8. It actually reads Kingsthorpe instead of Far Cotton, where it reads costs required for Kingsthorpe, where it should have said costs required for Far Cotton, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, the first paragraph.
Yes, and again in 8, it said spread the message of the Kingsthorpe community. Again, there's a misspelling there. It should be Far Cotton. So that's the only two things that I could see with that. So has anybody else got any problems with the minutes?
Yeah, Chair. I'm pretty sure I was at that meeting. So can the minutes be changed? I'm not listed as being there. I agree with your comments about notice also the agenda. I'm easily confused, and I thought I was invited to a meeting of the Kingsthorpe Parish Council. That's on the front page of the agenda as well. So,
okay, thank you for that, Brian. Is there anything else? No? Okay. Okay, so we'll move on. 4A, to further consider and agree the budget recommended by the full council last week. I think does Leslie have to present this?
Happy to, Chair.
Thank you, Leslie.
So there was a request from councillors to give more detail behind the budget, which has been provided in the report. You will see that the total has changed slightly. The original budget was very much a rounded budget. So when we've actually gone into more detail with the numbers, the total for this particular budget has come out at 147,424, which would give a Band A charge of £32.14 for the year and a Band D charge of £48.21 for the year. To put that into perspective, in Far Cotton and Delapré's community council area, there are 21% properties which are Band A properties, 37% Band B, 31% Band C, and only 7.7% Band D. So the majority of the residents in Far Cotton and Delapré will be paying less than £48.21.
Okay, thank you for that, Leslie. Is there any questions on that? Okay, so we'll move on then.
Councillor Roberts is indicating.
Sorry, Emma. Oh, I see the little hand up the corner. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. No problem at all. I'm assuming that we're going to discuss the budget. This is the place to do that. Yeah, we're looking at that now. Okay. I've got a few observations to make and things that I'd like us to consider. Thank you very much, Leslie, for providing the more detailed information. We've been asking for this for quite some time, and you've done that, which has been really helpful, and it gives a better breakdown. I still have a couple of concerns. One is the accommodation costs, which yourself and Kate have both confirmed can't be broken down any further, and you have no reasoning as to how that figure has been provided by NBC. In the Borough Council papers, it referenced that the Farcotton Recreation Centre generated an income of £68,000. So if we're talking about a full transfer of lease, there's a potential that the cost obviously would be much more significant than the £10,000. If we're talking about a room hire or a spaceage use, then obviously that would reduce the cost, I appreciate, but we have absolutely no information upon which to base that figure. I also have a concern that in this first year, given the situation we're in now, and the recommendation is to work from home where you can, the council meetings are likely to take place in this format. And I'm not sure what accommodation space is going to be required, if any at all, in that initial period. And it feels to me that £10,000 is a big figure, big number to add to this budget, when we don't know what that figure really represents, or even if it goes anywhere near to cover those figures. I'm also concerned about the level of reserves that we're setting. You know, none of us are mandated to this council. We're not. The community hasn't held its vote yet. And I feel uncomfortable about setting figures for something that I'm not mandated for, without a conversation with the public, with residents, consulting them on what their needs are for the council and what position they want to do with those funds and what ambitions they want this council to have. I know we've spoken a lot previously about the council. It's up to the councillors how ambitious they are, but that's important that we've consulted with the public on that. And we haven't had that consultation because we're placed in this position to having to do this right now. I know the recommendations within the document are that a reserve should be held. So that's a legal reserve. I appreciate that. It's a requirement, but the recommendation is 3 to 12 months. So I think we should give some consideration to reducing that level of reserves, or hearing an explanation as to why those level of reserves shouldn't be reduced. I've also got concern in respect of the items mentioned at 1.311 of the report that we've been provided with for tonight, which relates to the Farcotton and Delapré Community Council having control of the Mereway and Playdale Road allotments transferred as part of the reorganisation order. I've been back through as many documents as I could possibly do so, and certainly if we take the last community governance and asset transfer document that was put to us by NBC, there's no reference to that being an asset that's being transferred, and there's no reference in the budget to an income that would be generated from that. And I understand that there would be a potential income generated from it. There's also no details in the budget at all, or any element provided for maintenance of those allotments and any work that would be carried out. Currently, the allotment contract is managed by the ID Verdi contract with NBC, and that will transfer over into the West Northampton Unitary Authority. And unless I'm mistaken, and I have asked the questions at scrutiny on the West Northampton Authority, there's no information as yet as to which parts of the contract will remain in place, or whether there'll be any amendments to that. And we don't know what that's currently costing us. But it seems to me that by taking on those allotments, then the contract between NBC and ID Verdi, which will be West Northampton Authority and ID Verdi, there's a potential risk for that contract, the amount in that contract that it costs to maintain those allotments, to be transferred over to this council along with that transfer of asset. And there's no detail whatsoever around that. And I feel really uncomfortable, as I have done throughout the whole process, in respect of the information that's been provided to people and the way in which people are being led into this blind. I completely appreciate that we have to set a legal budget and we've got to set something, but I'm really concerned about the figures that are presented to us and the information we've been given to make that decision. I think we need to think carefully about the figures that are contained in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Next, I've got, would anybody like to come back on Councillor Roberts?
Councillors Davenport and Brian Markham are indicated.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Julie Davenport. Julie?
Thank you. Well, Councillor Roberts has covered quite a lot of my concerns. Mine also was is the allotments, because I didn't know. It's as if that was slipped in past us. And it's the total cost. And I think my problem with it, when I first looked at it, was that everyone would be paying more money a week, and all we would have to spend to show for it is 50,000. So we could maybe get the parking permits in Far Cotton, that scheme, and that would be it. So it's not an awful lot of money. And the reason I say that is because we've sort of put 2 staff members in, and I don't even think that you need 2 staff members. And I agree about the accommodation. And I don't know why ongoing, it is a very small parish council, that a clerk cannot work from home or even be self-employed and then claim for an office in her own house. But to employ 2 members of staff just seems very extreme. So I think, and also, like we said, £10,000 for accommodation, that isn't required either. So it just seems that we're not going to get a lot from it. So for every £3 put in, only £1, the 50,000, will be spent on the area, whereas the rest of it, and I understand, you know, you've got IT, you need different equipment, but I just think we could have got that down a lot lower for such a, because I don't know what 2 members of staff will do all day. Oh, I know one of them's part-time, but I just think we've loaded quite a lot in there. You know, if there'd been a lot more, say 100,000 we could spend on the area, or it wouldn't be so bad, but it's just the amount of costs that have been loaded onto this. So that is my big concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Councillor Brian Markham.
Excuse me, Chair. First of all, I have to point out that for a long time, ever since it's muted, that there was a rush to set up the new parish councils and community council, and indeed the town council, at the same time as we're moving to the new unitary authority. So there's been an awful lot of balls up in the air, and over the last years, and then everything's been delayed. There's been an awful lot of balls up in the air, and unfortunately, some of them still haven't landed yet. There is a lot of contingency needs to be sorted out. If I could comment on the allotments, this was discussed at the town council meeting the other night. Far Cotton and Delapré taking on allotments, town council taking on a lot of allotments, and so is Kingsthorpe. And there is obviously in the future an opportunity for, one way or another, the allotments manager for ID Verdi covers the whole town. There is presumably some way in the future for however those allotments in those new parishes are managed, then you know, we can work together. The Far Cotton and Delapré and Kingsthorpe and all the existing parish councils. So there's a lot of debate still needed about these budgets. Second point is, of £50,000, yeah, the setup costs are there, and at the end of the day, all that's left to go back to the community is £50,000. I'm sure over the years that will grow. The council, and I won't be on it, I'm not a resident of that area, I won't be, but surely that is for those elected in May, if the elections happen then, It's for those people elected in May to decide the future of the council. The way I agree, there are still questions to be answered. There are still things that may go up, may go down in the next 12 months as we work through it. But that really is for the new members elected in May to decide what their priorities are. And the way I see it tonight, we have to set a budget. This is reasonable. It can't explain everything because we don't know the answers to everything yet, unfortunately. I would rather all these I would rather that the unitary got out of the way, and then at the end, then maybe a year down the line, once people knew how the unitary was working, whether there were area committees, how things were arranged in the unitary, then if Arcot and Delapré felt they needed a lower level of council, then perhaps it should have been done then. The same with the town council, the same with Kingsthorpe. And then, you know where you were when you were starting, but we don't know what's going to happen with some things being continued by the unitary or not being continued by the unitary. Sorry to go on a long time.
Okay, that's fine.
But it is, I think we're just where we are now. We have some figures and it will all come out eventually, but unfortunately it's not there today.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for that. I think, Emma, have you left your hand up in the corner? Councillor Roberts?
I'd like to come back in if that's possible.
Okay, and then Kate.
Thank you. I'd just like to pick up on the reserves point, because I completely agree with Councillor Davenport in respect of not having a lot to do anything with. But I think it's important we note that £50,000 is reserves. Okay, so that's not £50,000 to spend. We've got to keep that in reserves. And yes, we might be able to go into it to use it for something to facilitate, but you've got to maintain that level of reserve and carry it over. So if we spend it all in the first year, then you're not going to have anything in reserve. And then the following year, you're going to have to create another reserve pot. And that's not how a reserve should work, obviously. So, and I just want to go back onto the allotments position. The reorganisation order in its schedule attachment to the order states that the allotments will be transferred on the 1st of April 2020. So we effectively take on maintenance of those allotments from the 1st of April 2020. It is so important that we think about what we've been put into here, because nobody has discussed that. It's not part of any asset transfer document. There's no recommendations to it. And it's interesting that in the reorganisation area, it says that appropriate office accommodation will be a part of a transfer, but that agreement date for that to happen is the 1st of April 2021. The dates are muddled up in the order, obviously, so the dates are wrong. There's nothing in the asset transfer documents that deal with any of that. And I just feel that whilst I understand where Councillor Markham's coming from in respect of we've been put in this position and we have to set something, I think where we can take items off that we don't think are necessary to reduce the level of overall budget, then we should do that. And then we should allow the elected councillors to consult with the public what they want to do with the money, and then set an appropriate precept for the following year to be active on and work on. If you take off the accommodation costs, that takes it down to 137,424. If you reduce the amount held in reserves, that takes it down. If you take it down to 3 months, that will take it down to 112. So I think it's important to consider those amendments as being a potential course of action.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I've got Kate, then Councillor Davenport, and then Councillor Larratt. Thank you, Kate.
I was just going to come back with a couple of technical points. Councillor Davenport mentioned the possibility of a clerk being self-employed. Legally, the council must employ the clerk. Your permanent clerk would need to be an employed post rather than a self-employed post. Just a technical point to make. With the accommodation costs, it was mentioned that the council may continue to have meetings remotely. At the current time, the regulations that allow us to meet remotely fall in May, and the government has indicated that at the current time they do not intend to renew those regulations. So there would absolutely be, whatever other accommodation costs there would absolutely be costs around meetings, because it's likely that later in the year we will go back to having meetings in person. And then just on the allotments, I have spoken to Richard Walden, who is the interim town clerk at Northampton Town Council, obviously, and he and I are going to do our best to work through what the costs are and look at the management of the allotments across the Town Council, Kingsthorpe, and of course Far Cotton, and come back with a report to a future meeting to explain how those costs would work.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Davenport.
No, I just wanted to come back because I assumed, and obviously I assumed wrong, that the £50,000, it says to develop future services. Now, I took that was for us to develop services for our area, and then whatever's left, transfer to reserves if we wish, if there's any left. So maybe I got that wrong. So maybe Councillor Larratt can assure me on that. And as for the staff, I still don't know why we need two. So I think that bill could come down. I expected us to have one part-time clerk. I mean, I don't know, how many meetings do we have a month? How much work is there? I don't know. And again, yeah, with the accommodation costs, I don't see why someone can't work from home if they're just, and they might like to do that. A mum at home, being able to do clerk work, because the councillors are not going to be in the office all the time, so we shouldn't need that. But yeah, so if someone can, Councillor can clarify that 50,000, please.
I'll thank you, Councillor Davenport. I don't know whether it's down to Councillor Larratt or whether Leslie or Laurie Gold could help us on this, but Councillor Larratt is to speak next. So, Councillor Larratt.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll leave it for officers to explain that £50,000 and how much is transferred to reserve and how much is used for services, etc. But I have to say I agree with Councillor Markham on this one. Yes, we have here a suggested budget, a budget that will get the council up and running. It will give newly elected councillors the opportunity to work on behalf of the community and to invest in the community. Now, yes, some of the figures perhaps do need working on, are a bit vague. Accommodation, £10,000, maybe it isn't very clear. Maybe there could be more clarity. But at the end of the day, Councillor Davenport's perhaps suggesting that perhaps there isn't enough to invest in services. Well, if accommodation's too high, then that money could be used to invest in services. I think we've got to look at the whole thing in the round, Chairman. And I think as a round budget of this amount, which in actual fact is a lower council tax charge than the town council set last night, I think that, and bearing in mind that the significant part of the council tax base is in bands A, B and C, are going to be paying less than £48. I think we've got a fair and balanced budget here that will enable a newly elected council to operate effectively for the benefit of the community going forward. All this money is going to be reinvested back in Far Cotton and Delapré, and I think that's what's important. Yes, we've got to build up reserves. To what level? I'm sure the parish clerk will have that in mind in order for the council to be safe and legal, and I think we've got to take their advice on that. With regard to allotments, yes, allotments are included in the transfer, and that is something that happens with every transfer when you establish a town, parish, community council or whatever. Closed churchyards and allotments automatically transfer to the new councils. So that is something that is simply automatic. It isn't unique to Northampton. It's something that happens everywhere else. But I think what we've got here is a good budget for the first year, to give the new councillors scope to work effectively and to deliver for the residents. If they wish to reduce the cost or increase the cost in future years, I'm nothing to do with Far Cotton, as Councillor Markham says. That will be up for the residents for themselves to decide. And I think that that's what we should do. Give them the opportunity to utilise this money however they wish, and to then formulate a plan going forward and how they're going to fund that, and then set their future precepts accordingly. There is still work to do, and the budget will change and it will grow, it may reduce, but that's a matter for the new councillors. I think if we try and reduce it and set it even lower, then it may well be, as Councillor Davenport is talking about services and adding services, it may be even more difficult to deliver those because you would have to have a much higher increase. I think this is a fair average setting of the council tax, and I would fully support it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lowett. Mr. Mark Plowman and then Councillor Brian Markham. Mr. Plowman.
Is it okay for me to make a comment?
Yes, I think it is.
It's I'm just a little concerned. I understand fully that the budget is a major part of what the parish council is all about and the precept setting, but I'm just a little concerned about, we're now nearly into February, and obviously the elections, if they go ahead this year, will be historically are the first week of May. That doesn't leave very long to get this out to the public and the residents when we're looking for 12 parish councillors to fill the posts. So I'm just a little concerned that, as I say, I understand the budget is a very important part of it, but I really think that it needs to be sorted out sooner rather than later so we can get on with getting this out to the public, really. So that's all.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Markham.
From the debate so far, it seems that Councillor Davenport and Councillor Roberts are suggesting reducing the, and I would agree, reading it here, what we're saying, the £50,000 is to spend, if you like, or to save it, depending on what the new council does. Now, if you yourself, Chair, resident of the area, and so on, you have expressed, if Councillor Davenport, Councillor Roberts want to knock that out of the budget and anything else out of the budget, then I wouldn't vote against them, especially if you're supporting it on the basis I'm not a resident. It's not for me. However, I would point out that if you knock the £50,000 out the budget, then the rest of the money, including £25,000 for cost of elections, you would be holding elections, you would be electing a new council, and they would have no money to spend. All they would be doing is paying wages. And surely, that, when it comes to the, who's going to stand for that council, and what's the point of that council if it doesn't have any money to spend to do anything at all except hold meetings, whether they're Zoom or they're in somewhere else? What would be the point? So if you take that £50,000, it is for the new council to decide what it does with that 50. It could save it all to the following year, but if you cut it out, it's not there at all. There's no point in having the council, as far as I can see, to be quite honest.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, obviously, I agree totally with what Councillor Lowett was saying. We have to make sure going ahead. None of us know after May, if it goes ahead, who is going to be in these positions, but we don't want to leave them in a position where, we are where we are, and we don't want to leave them high and dry. I'm all for the precept as it is.
Can I also add to that, Chair? I think we must set these councils up so that they can be effective and provide for their community. We mustn't set them up to fail. And if you reduce this amount, that's exactly what you'll be doing, because as Councillor Markham says, you will simply be taking away the ability for the council to do anything on behalf of the community. And
Exactly.
at the end of the day, this is all about reinvesting money in Delapré and Far Cotton, and Delapré and Far Cotton needs that investment and can only benefit from this additional investment. So, you know, I don't see how you can have an effective council. You'll only have something that will fail if you don't have this adequate budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. I totally agree with that. Councillor Emma Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back again on 2 points. Councillor Markham's point in respect of reducing it and then not having anything to do with it, and Councillor Larratt's point about investing back into the community. What I struggle with is how we're okay to set people up with a budget that hasn't been scrutinised, and it's okay to set people up with a budget where the figures might not be right, and it's okay to set people up with a budget where we're taking on the maintenance of properties, which I appreciate is in the reorganisation order, but we're taking on the maintenance of that without a discussion about it, without including that in the budget, and without considering the maintenance costs. You're saying it's okay to do all of that and go in blind, but it's not okay to try and consider setting a slightly reduced precept to allow people to cope with the difficult circumstances that they're in at the moment, while still leaving some funds for the elected councillors to make plans for what they want to achieve for the council. I would rather that a community council was able to do things reasonably and appropriately, and it's slightly slower if it's done correctly, to make sure it's invested properly back into the community, and it isn't just put on this kind of, it feels like on the back of a packet of something budget, and we're doing it the wrong way round. We're completely doing it the wrong way around. Normally, all these inquiries and investigations would be done before this budget was being set. And I think Councillor Larratt's comments in respect of setting people up to fail, I mean, I've said at every NBC meeting for quite some time that these documents that have been produced for people have been setting people up to fail. So I would appreciate it if you didn't come along and kind of suggest that that's what we're doing by debating the budget document, which is important to do. And it just feels to me like we can't say it's okay to do all of those things blindly and not consider any of those things, but it's not okay to question this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Davenport, and then Councillor Eales.
Well said. I mean, it's called democracy, and the reason that you have people elected is so you can debate things and not just be told, well, you know, you're setting people up to fail. And I must admit, I'm a bit disappointed by that, because that's not what we're saying. We are saying that it's overinflated, and I still haven't been told what that 50,000 is about. So if someone could explain that to me, and then I'll come back, please.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Terry Eales, and then Councillor Larratt.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I said it last time, I've said it in Borough Council meetings. At the moment, we're in unprecedented times. There's 1 in 4 workers at the moment that are on furlough, so they're earning 80% wages. I think what we need to be looking at is where we can save people money at the moment. The council tax for the unitary is going to go up a massive amount. The Police and Crime Commissioner is put in their budget to up it by 5% as well. Everything is just being massively inflated at the moment. I think what we need to do is make sure that residents aren't going to be put in a more of a sticky situation when we could save the money, and then let people that are actually elected to this council make decisions moving forward. Because at the end of the day, there's not one of us that have been elected to this council at all. So none of us have technically got the mandate, and nobody has been out and asked residents what they're thinking about different bits and pieces to do with the council, what they want their council to be doing, and things like that. So I think we need to be really careful about how we handle this and actually try and save money where we can, so that people can make the decisions moving forward as to what they want their councils to be doing.
Thank you, Councillor Eales. Councillor Larratt.
Sorry, Chair, I was going to wait until the £50,000 been explained as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. So, Danny Moody.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak. It's much appreciated. And for those that don't know, I'm the Chief Executive of Northants Calc, which is the membership organisation for all the parish and town councils and community councils in Northamptonshire. And I just want to say I completely agree with virtually every comment that's been made, regardless of which political group it's come from. And I think you're in almost an impossible position, even if there was nothing else going on in the world. It would be a really difficult task to set a year one budget for a council that effectively doesn't exist yet. Put on top of that Brexit, put on top of that coronavirus, put on top of that local government reorganisation, and you people have got an impossible task to do. So for me, it's about, we could sit all night and talk about, should this be 10,000 or 8,000 or 12,000 and get into the minutiae. But for me, it's about thinking about, what is your job this evening? So there are four things in my view. One is to set a budget. Far Cotton and Delapré Community Council must set a budget, and it must be done by the end of January. So it must be done tonight, effectively. And there's no getting away from that. There's no leaving this meeting deciding that we need, oodles of new information or detail around things. A budget has to be set tonight of whatever level you decide as members. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to establish the new community council on a proper legal and financially safe footing. And that's why there's a recommendation to transfer to reserves. You cannot have, from an audit point of view, a council that doesn't have sufficient reserves. And you can argue about what the appropriate level of reserves is. And for a brand new council, a lower level of reserves is perfectly acceptable until it starts taking on assets and so on. The third task that I think you have is to give this new council a fighting chance. And I've heard lots of comments that just are looking at the whole negative side of this council, the cost and what people are going to have to pay for it. But what about the positive side of the council? What about if Far Cotton and Delapré Community Council decided that it would open a one-stop shop for vulnerable residents who are having a very difficult time, and to provide local government services through that one-stop shop, so that people in the community have somewhere where they can go for help at a time when they need it most. And if that means hiring a premises somewhere in the community, and that's going to cost 10 grand to do, pay the 10 grand. So please look at this from a positive point of view, not just what the cost is going to be to the community. And then the fourth and final thing is to enable some quick wins. Far Cotton and Delapré Community Council is starting from zero. Most of the people out there don't know anything about it at all. We're quite lucky. We've been thinking about Far Cotton and Delapré Community Council for a while now, but most members of the public don't even know about it and won't know about it until their council tax bill arrives. So there's a huge task to do in order to establish this council, to deliver value for money for the people of Far Cotton and Delapré, and to earn its stripes in the first year of its existence. And in order to do that, it needs resources. And councils are basically people organisations. So this council needs to find people to stand for election, as Mark Plowman said. The close of nominations is the 8th of April. That's 70 days away. You don't have a lot of time. You need to put resources into that. We need to get the website up and running. You need your interim clerk in place. And it all takes time and it all takes money. With all due respect, this is not a job that is for a part-time mother working at home. I think that was a derogatory remark. This is a local authority that you're setting up, and it will require professional, objective officers. Now, if the full-time clerk of Far Cotton and Delapré Community Council happens to be a mother who's currently living in Far Cotton and Delapré and wants to take the job, well, fine, but it will be a professional job. It's not a part-time game, it's a professional job running a parish council or a community council of this type. So those are your jobs, and I completely understand. I mean, if I were in your position, I would be asking the exact same questions as Councillor Roberts has been asking about the detail behind all these figures. But the reality is that Northampton Borough Council, which itself only has a few days of existence left, doesn't have the resources to provide Far Cotton and Delapré Community Council and all the other new councils with all the financial and asset information that would happen in normal circumstances. If we weren't dealing with coronavirus and we weren't dealing with local government reorganisation, then I would be more in favour of putting pressure on the officers at the Borough Council to deliver this information. But I think we have to recognise the moment that we're at and the circumstances that we're trying to operate in and trying to get this council up and running. The average Band D tax rate for parish councils in England is £75. So if I was in your shoes, I'd be saying, what is a reasonable Band D tax rate to set for a parish council? And I'd work backwards. There's even been a suggestion nationally that this decision shouldn't be made locally by appointed councillors. The government should just say whatever the prevailing average Band D tax rate is in the country, that's what will be, the tax rate will be for a brand new council. So if we had that legislation, it would be £75 and we wouldn't be having this conversation. So £48, or if you want to reduce it by a tiny amount, fine, but it's only going to be a tiny amount. For me, it's not worth it. The one thing that I can guarantee is that whatever this budget says is not what's going to actually happen. But if we spend 10 hours working on it and dreaming up a different figure, I can guarantee that that won't happen either. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Danny. Okay, I'm going to take 2 more questions. I've got Councillor Julie Davenport and Councillor Emma Roberts, and then we'll move on.
Everything that was just said, I still haven't got my answer about the fifth. All I want is a short thing to tell me what that £50,000 is for. You say we need to have reserves. How much legally? Because I don't know. No one's ever told me. I thought that 50,000 would be for services. So if that can please be.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Laurie.
I think probably if you let Leslie speak first, and could I speak then after Leslie?
Okay, thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. So the 50,000, the reason it was put down to develop future services and transfer to reserves, there's a wide range of reserves that are recommended. So it's between 3 and 12 months for a council. So the £50,000 represents 6 months based on your budget. So if you needed to dip into reserves to develop a service in year 1 going into year 2, you should still have 3 months of reserves sitting there ready to move into your year 2. So that money is there, it can be used, but obviously it is a reserves figure, so you don't want to use all of it. You need to keep a very close eye on it, and that's why we set it at the 50,000, which is a 6 months value. And if you did need to use some, it was there for use for services.
Thank you, Leslie. Laurie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, forgive me for repeating the words of other members tonight, but really this budget, a contingency budget, is a perfectly legal budget. I can say that with certainty, and it is what is required under the legislation. And my experience of setting council, these sort of councils up in the past, we did exactly the same with contingency budgets. And as has been said a number of times tonight, it is perfectly open to members to question that, quite right, and certainly that is something we would all welcome. But as Danny has said tonight as well, we're getting very near the end of the line. This is a very modest budget for the size of the parish council we've got. It does give it a little bit of room for manoeuvre for the things that the elected members will want to do after May. And a lot of thought has gone into it in that way. I'm sorry if we haven't provided much more detail. A little bit more detail on the question of Ave Verde and allotments and so on. I think from the conversations I have had, and certainly the indications we've had from the Shadow Unitary Authority, we will be working something out which we'll bring to you at a future meeting. And I think this has already been said tonight, which will show that we can sort of have a composite agreement right across the 3 parishes for one person to be managing the allotments and working for each of the councils. And we can come up with something that will be rational, both from a cost position and also for providing a proper service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Larry. Sorry. Councillor Emma Roberts, please.
I haven't been mine because I was waiting for the 50,000. And so what I thought was the 50,000 to spend for our residents, quick wins, it's not then, is it? Because it's 6 months reserves, which to me makes it worse. And one thing I would like to say that I really object to is what Danny said about at-home mothers. It was an insult to the job. I know at-home mothers who are lawyers, they're doctors, they're teachers, you know, they have their own offices anyway. I've got my own office. I'm sure most of us have. So that wasn't derogatory. And mum at home is not derogatory. They can be professional. So
okay, thank you.
But I said,
Emma Roberts.
How much money? I still haven't been told how much we can spend, please.
If I can come in, because I think I can help Julie with the answer to that anyway.
Yes,
anyway,
please.
Chair.
So Roberts.
So I would firstly like to start off with that I wholeheartedly agree with Julie's comments in respect of a stay-at-home mum, and I'm going to put Danny's comments down to the frustration that he's got perhaps with how this is going, because I don't actually agree in respect of reducing the staffing costs necessarily, because having had a conversation and a couple of email exchanges with Kate and Leslie, they've got a hell of a job, and Kate's got a hell of a job ahead of her. So I do totally accept that, but absolutely 100% a working or stay-at-home mum is still capable of doing a very technical role, whether they are at home or they are not. So I think we need to be very careful in the way that we approach those things. On the reserves side of things, the legal recommendation in the document, Councillor Davenport says that the recommendation is between 3 and 12 months worth of reserves are held. So this is a figure of 6 months reserves. So that means that we would need to save £25,000 of that really to move over into the reserves to be safe and legal. So there's roughly £25,000 to move on. However, the issue still for me, and I know we've got to pass something this evening, I appreciate that. The issue still for me is that these figures may well increase, and that whole £25,000 may actually have to go into the contingency budget, come out of reserves or develop services budget, go into the contingency budget to cover the legal fees and the position that if any of the other figures are incorrect or we need to spend it somewhere else on there. And not knowing about the asset transfers is a big deal. It's not a little bit more information. It's a big deal. We don't know what we're doing with them and we don't know how much they're going to cost us to maintain them. Then it's really difficult. I know we've got to set something. So what I'm saying is, and what I've said with the commentary is, where there is an item that looks irrelevant at the moment, let's not set that. And then just finally on Danny's commentary about the £75 being the average council tax. I don't disagree with you. If a council is going to be ambitious and it's going to achieve and it's going to spend in its community, then it's got to generate funds from somewhere. But what we have to do as a community council is look at grant funding. We have to look at other revenue streams. We have to look at ways that we can make money so that we aren't increasing the precept to levels that are unnecessary. And I think whether this figure is this figure or we reduce it slightly to deal with the items that I've suggested, there is a very distinct possibility that the recommendation of the councillors next year will be to increase this precept. Under no illusion of that. But I still don't think that that's a reason to pass a budget without the correct information. So where we can shave something off it, we should shave something off it. And even that, if that's just a few pounds, because I don't care whether it's £96 a week or, sorry, 96 pence a week or whatever it is. If you haven't got 96 pence, 96 pence is a lot of money. Yeah, if you don't have it, it's a lot of money. And that's really important for me. So I think wherever possible, if there is a movement on it, we should consider a movement on it.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I just wondered if I could ask Kate. I think you mentioned at some time or other about funding, about finding funding, which Councillor Roberts has just alluded to. I think there's ways and means of a parish council to be able to find funding. Could you highlight us more on that, Kate?
It depends on, it would very much depend on what projects the council wanted to look at, but there are a wealth of funding streams available, from lottery funding, it depends on the siting of the parish, but various landfill taxes, various heritage streams, there's green spaces funding. I mean, I had a funding bulletin through in my email today that had about 30 to 40 streams that are available at the moment. Very much project dependent. The council would have to apply for those funds and put in a solid application that could be approved. But certainly, if we're looking at any capital projects or new projects or startup projects, youth services, that kind of thing, there are absolutely funding streams that the council should be going for, and that me or whoever is the permanent clerk would certainly be looking to achieve for you.
Thank you. I think also there was talk of a few of you might smile at this 106 agreement money that could come into our area if any other buildings was to take place around the area. So you know, that's another a stream of money that could come into the council.
Parish councils can be quite successful in if there is development, in making sure that you know, community projects come through to the parish council and putting forward projects that they want to see delivered, capital projects that they want to see delivered in their area, and gaining Section 106 money for them. I've successfully done that in the past in other areas, so I'm sure whoever is the permanent clerk would be able to look at that for you too.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Larratt.
Can I just say, first of all, on Kate's point there, yes, there are all these funding streams available, and I fully appreciate that. And I think it's only right that parish councils maximise what they can obtain through those funding streams. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be 100% funding. You know, it will be proportionate, and there will be a need for the parish council itself to invest in some way or another. So, you know, please don't think you're going to get 100% of funding to do projects, because there will have to be investment from the parish itself. So, you know, you can't say we don't need anything to spend because we'll get it from the lottery or whatever. No, you'll have to actually put in quite a significant amount to match the funding that they're going to give you in some respects. But I think, Chair, I hear what everybody's saying. If we look back at what's happened, the town council has set a precept of £48.75, I think it is. Kingsthorpe have set a precept of 30 something, all in line with the suggestions made via the borough council. Those councils are going to have the funding that it is considered appropriate and necessary for them to come into being and to have the money to deliver in the first year, and not just be a talking shop that delivers nothing. So I think, yes, there's £50,000 there for reserves, £25,000 of which could be spent. But I think at the end of the day, and I come back to what I said, I think this is a fair and reasonable budget. And when we talk about what people are going to be paying, they're not going to be paying £48. Most of them, and a significant number, are going to be paying less. I think, you know, somebody said the council tax rise is going to be substantial. It is in percentage terms, but you've got to look at that in relation to Northampton, where it won't necessarily be as high as Daventry and South Northants, who are playing catch up. And on top of that, Chair, the situation for those most in need and in the most difficult situation, the unitary authority has agreed a significant change in the council tax reduction scheme, whereby the most vulnerable and those in need will only be paying 20% of the precept, whereas at the moment in Northampton they pay over 30. So the residents of Northampton are going to benefit greatly, and those in need in Northampton are going to benefit greatly from that additional council tax reduction. So I think, Chair, all I can say is I fully support the recommendation, and I'm happy to propose it as a resolution.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lowe. I'm going to take one more question from Councillor Julie Davenport, and then we must move on.
You're muted.
Sound as though it's a fait accompli, and you know we can agree or disagree on that. However, I would like to say that when it came to the reorganisation of local government with the 2 unitaries, and we, as I said before, we were told we were going to save money, and I bought into that. But obviously it's not going to save money because we're actually having almost a 5% increase. And to a lot of people that aren't on benefit, but are the squeezed middle, as they're called, they struggle. I know they do. They're going to food banks now where they haven't done before. And then when I was sold this, you know, I bought into it because I thought that the residents would get a lot out of it. Now, if I had seen this budget at that time and known that there'd only be £25,000 to spend in the first year, and all the rest of the other money would either go into reserves or to administration costs, I'm not sure that I could have accepted that. And I'm just finding that difficult because I just feel that I wasn't given the facts about the unitaries and I wasn't given the facts about this, but we had to give a decision early, and now we just have to live with it, and that's how it feels to me.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to 4B, to agree the precept demand for 2021-22. I think Councillor Larratt proposed it. Am I correct there, Councillor Larratt?
Yes, he did.
Well,
you need a seconder.
I will second that.
Thank you.
So we will need to have a show of hands, please, for to agree the precept.
Can we have a clear show of hands, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, we've not got Councillor Markham, Councillor Eales, Councillor Larratt. I haven't got Maisie. Could you help with this, please?
Just yourself and Councillor Larratt have shown hands.
Right.
Okay. So those that are against? Maisie again?
Just Councillor Davenport, Chair.
So the motion's carried. Okay.
Chair,
Okay. Motion.
can I just say one thing, if I may?
Yes, by all means. Emma,
Thank you.
yes.
It's impossible for me to go for or against because I still don't have the information I've asked for. We should have had that information beforehand, and we haven't. So it's impossible for me to make an opinion on that.
Thank you. Thank you for
Can I just say, I was wondering whether there was going to be an alternative put forward. So I didn't. That's carried anyway.
It's carried. Yeah. Thank you. So,
Councillor, just to say, Councillor Roberts' point will be noted. Thank you.
thank you for that. So I know there's things to move on, but agree a date for the next meeting. Could we do that?
There has been a date suggested of Thursday, the 25th of February.
7 o'clock.
Yes, 7 o'clock.
Okay, you all got that, thank you. Number 6, items for information. I think maybe some of you, all of you hopefully, got Councillor Roberts' thing about the police. So if Emma, if you'd like to speak on this.
I would please, Chair. I didn't share it with everybody, Chair, because I shared it with you as a request to have the item on the agenda. So I didn't share it with everybody. I will happily distribute it out afterwards. So I'd consulted with the community policing team and the policing sergeant. And one of the things that I thought would be a good idea was to have the crime figures reported as part of our agenda. I'd suggested that to the chair, and I'd suggested that to Kate and Democratic Services, etc. So I just wanted to give the crime figures that have been provided by the community policing team, and then make a proposal that the item is added as a regular agenda item to receive those crime figures, and to give Kate her first action, if I may, to liaise with the community policing team. I'm happy to set that up with you, Kate. Any of us could, but given that I'd reached out to them, and they'd reached out to me, to set up a conversation in respect of having them visit the meetings. I was going to say the accommodation, but we don't have them. To visit the meetings and set up a process with them, if that would be okay. That's the proposal I would like to make. Thank you very much. As if by magic.
Okay, there we have it. There we have it.
As if by magic. So the figures are now on the screen.
It's excellent.
Thank you very much. So you can see the January figures for burglary residential, burglary non-business, criminal damage and vehicle damage presented. For anyone that can't see the screen for any reason, I'll just read those out. That's 13 residential burglaries, 0 burglary non-business, criminal damage 8, and vehicle crime 10. And that's the January figure. So
Emma, can I just ask what the figures in brackets are? Are they previous month or same time last year, or?
Yeah, they're the previous figure. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Emma, that's excellent. I totally agree with what this is. As you know, I mean, for years we've always had, when it was Far Cotton residents, we always used to get a police officer attend, sometimes with figures, sometimes without figures. But as times got on, sometimes they couldn't turn up. So they used to send it through us in the post. And Mr. Plowman will know this, that we always had a very good relationship with the police. So for us to continue with that is fantastic. So well done. Thank you. Kate.
I was just going to say, when Emma sent this through to me today, I did explain to Emma and yourself back in the email that NCALC do now have a police representative liaison scheme, whereby they ask every parish to appoint somebody to be a police liaison representative. So I will bring that back to the next meeting as well, along with a monthly police report, so that we can look at how the council works with the police moving forward.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you very much for that, Kate. Has anyone got any more questions? I've just got a couple of things, you know, that we've talked about. You've talked about them tonight, and I do understand how we all feel about this. And you know, we don't know as if we're walking down an alley blind when it comes to allotments. I don't know if you all understand, when we take the building on, is there any work that need doing on it? You know, there's so many questions to ask of what are we taking on? And I'm sure these questions will be answered by someone, hopefully before the 12 people that will be the committee. We hopefully can get it put in place for those 12 people. So I'd just like to say, if there's no more questions, I'll close the meeting.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.